A black woman stepped into first class at O'Hare with nothing but grace and a boarding pass. But what happened next? They accused her of lying, tried to remove her, until she calmly reached for her wallet and revealed a badge that silenced an entire plane. Stay with me. This is a story about power, prejudice, and poise. If it moves you, share this story. It might just change the way we see people who don't look like they belong. It all started at an ordinary. A black woman walks into an airport. No, she does not stumble. She does not shout. She does not apologize. She steps forward, shoulders straight, blazer smooth, lips pressed into the kind of quiet a mother teaches her daughter when the world will not offer grace. Her name is Olivia Armstrong. And she is not a passenger. She is a senator. But that is not the first thing they see. No, the first thing they see is her skin. And in that silent calculation, without a word spoken, her worth is weighed, questioned, and nearly dismissed. O'Hare International buzzes with a kind of hurried indifference, where everyone moves quickly but sees so little. The intercom cracks a boarding call, first class, Washington, D.C., and Olivia joins the short line. The woman in front of her wears pearls and a practiced smile. The man behind her checks his Rolex twice. Olivia holds nothing but her boarding pass and her breath. A gate agent glances at the ticket, then at Olivia. A beat, then another. "You're Miss Armstrong?" Her voice isn't cruel, just coated in doubt, dipped in that ever-so-familiar syrup of suspicion black folks learn to taste before they can read. "Yes," Olivia says, calm as a church bell. The scanner beeps confirmation. Still, the agent hesitates. "First class." She says this time like a riddle, like Olivia's name doesn't belong next to a seat near the cockpit. "Yes, first class." The agent nods stiffly, waves her on. It could have ended there. But we know better. See, racism rarely arrives shouting. It whispers. It hides behind policies and systems and misunderstandings. It wraps itself in airline uniforms and customer service smiles, and it waits for the right moment to prove you don't belong. Olivia walks down the jet bridge. The kind of silence that follows isn't reverent, it's restrained. Eyes linger. A steward lifts a brow. Another tightens their jaw. She shows her carry-on. Takes her seat. 2A. Not 12A. Not 22A. 2A. First class. The man across the aisle lifts his gaze, then lowers it, but not before she sees the question there. It is always the same question. How? Not who. Not why. But how? Minutes pass. The plane is boarding. Then the whispers begin. That seat might be double booked. We'll need to verify her boarding pass again. Then a man appears. White. Polished. Angry. He doesn't ask. He claims the seat. His voice raised just enough to invite witnesses. "I paid for 2A. I've flown this route for years." He looks at her as if she's the intruder, the mistake, the imposter. And there it is again, the echo of a nation that has spent centuries insisting that black presence must be explained, proven, justified, even when it sits with a ticket in hand. Now let me say this plainly, for those who need reminding. This wasn't about a seat. It never is. This was about the inherited assumption that whiteness equals priority and that blackness, no matter how accomplished, no matter how dignified, must always be verified. That even when you've been elected by the people, when you carry the laws of the land in your briefcase, you can still be asked, "Are you sure this is your place?" And Olivia? She doesn't rise. Not yet. Because she knows what I know and what you, if you're old enough, have seen with your own weary eyes. Sometimes, the most radical act a black person can commit is to simply remain seated, to hold their space, to not explain, to breathe while the room forgets how. But make no mistake, this story does not end here. Because she does have something in her wallet. And when she pulls it out, the air in that cabin will change. Not because the badge gives her value, but because they cannot deny it. And that, my friend, is the irony that keeps echoing in this country. They only believe your worth once it's stamped in gold. They only listen once they see power reflected in their own language. But what truly happens, when we stop asking for permission to belong? Stay with me, because that question is about to be answered at 30,000 feet. And justice, in this story, is wearing navy blue. You would think, after Chicago winters and campaign trails that stretch longer than a Mississippi highway, you would think a seat on a plane would be the least of Senator Olivia Armstrong's battles. But racism, like rust, doesn't need fire. It corrodes slowly, silently. It eats through metal, yes, but more often, it eats through faith. Olivia sits in seat 2A, her spine straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her badge still hidden. The man beside her taps at his phone. The attendants float by with cold smiles, their words wrapped in politeness, but laced with something colder. Then comes the third inquiry. Another uniform. Another question. Ma'am, could we take another look at your boarding pass? They ask like it's routine. But we know what routine means in this country. It means suspicion dressed up as protocol. It means dignity chipped away, one just doing my job at a time. She hands over the pass again. Smiles again. The steward nods, everything looks good. But his eyes say something else. His eyes say, I'm not sure you belong here. Not quite. Now, let me tell you something. There's a difference between being seen and being watched. Olivia is being watched. Watch the way a store clerk watches a child with empty pockets. Watch the way a police cruiser slows beside a black teenager walking home. The whole front cabin begins to hum with tension. Not loud, not obvious, but it's there in the shifting eyes, in the cautious silence. Then it comes. A second passenger enters. White, assertive, dressed for Wall Street, but armed with entitlement older than this country. He scans the cabin, sees Olivia in 2A, and without hesitation, he says the thing people like him always say when the truth unsettles them. You're in my seat. What follows is not a conversation. It is a contest. He doesn't ask. He declares. She doesn't rise. She reaffirms. I have the boarding pass. This is my seat. And just like that, the cabin becomes a courtroom. Not one with robes and gavels, but with gate agents and murmuring witnesses. You can almost hear the unspoken charges. Being black while boarding early. Being black while sitting quietly. Being black while occupying space that wasn't built with you in mind. The flight attendants now fumble over devices and call supervisors. We may need to reaccommodate someone, they say. Such a lovely word, reaccommodate. As if displacement were a minor inconvenience. As if Olivia's presence were the real glitch. They suggest she step off the plane, just for a moment, they say. But a moment is all it takes to rewrite a narrative. She doesn't move. Because she knows, when a black woman stands, history leans forward. Let me pause here and ask you something. Do you remember when in your life you first realized that your skin could be questioned more than your words? Do you remember how often you've been asked to explain your presence, even when invited? That's the wound. Not the insult itself, but the familiarity of it. The damn predictability. Olivia begins to scroll through her phone, searching for the official Senate travel confirmation. The man in the suit, Craig Donovan, he finally announces himself, huffs like a man whose authority is being disrespected. He doesn't see Olivia. Not really. He sees an error. A threat. A story that doesn't match the picture in his head. Because in that picture, people like him sit in 2A. And people like her serve drinks or apologize from behind a desk. That's the picture he was raised on. That's the picture America still hangs in too many living rooms. They ask for her ID. Again. Now they want proof of her title. Senator? They ask, their voices rising an octave. As if the word can't quite fit with her face. Senator? As if her seat in Congress is more unbelievable than their mistake. She doesn't argue. Not yet. Because dignity doesn't rush. It waits. She opens her wallet. But not yet. Not now. Because if she has to reveal that badge, then something has already failed. And here, my friend, is the quiet war Black people fight daily. Not against slurs, but assumptions. Not against fists, but questions. Are you sure this is your seat? Are you sure you work here? Are you sure you belong? That's the American Inquisition. And it has no courtroom, no calendar, no end. But Olivia? She's weathered worse storms than this. The man can keep fuming. The staff can keep doubting. The system can keep glitching. But the badge she carries? It wasn't given. It was earned. And when it appears, when that gold-embossed truth shines in their hands, they will remember. It wasn't her seat that was in question. It was theirs. And the reckoning hasn't even begun. There's a kind of silence that isn't peace. It's not the silence of rest, nor the silence of reverence. It is the silence of held breath. Of glances exchanged but not spoken. Of a room deciding whether or not it believes in your humanity. And this is where Olivia Armstrong now sits. Seat 2A. First class. But don't be fooled. The leather cushion beneath her doesn't make the air lighter. It makes it heavier when the people around you believe your very presence is a mistake. Craig Donovan, with his navy suit and Wall Street swagger, still stands in the aisle. He's not just waiting for a seat. He's waiting for the world to rearrange itself back into an order he understands. You see, for men like him, order has always meant hierarchy. And hierarchy, well, has always meant people like Olivia must be beneath. So he speaks louder. He shows his pass. He flashes his booking email. He name-drops the price he paid. Because money is supposed to mean power. And power, to him, means priority. The flight crew, now visibly uneasy, start speaking in half-truths. There must be a technical error. We're just trying to clarify. We may need to move someone, just temporarily. Temporarily. Isn't that always the excuse? Black folks get told their inclusion is temporary every time they walk into a boardroom, or a courtroom, or, as it turns out, a plane. They're welcome, but not permanent. Tolerated, but not trusted. A fourth crew member appears. He doesn't greet Olivia. He speaks only to Craig. We'll see what we can do, sir. Sir. That word echoes like a verdict. Olivia is addressed as ma'am, with professional caution. But Craig is sir, with deference, like they're already sure of his complaint. She watches the imbalance play out. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't raise her voice. Because in America, when a Black woman raises her voice, people stop listening to what she's saying and start remembering what they fear. Now they want her to move. Just for a moment. Just to sort things out. And here lies the bitter brilliance of discrimination in our time. It's no longer allowed. It doesn't wear white robes or spit slurs. It wears a polite smile. It uses soft words. It asks nicely while backing you toward the door. But Olivia doesn't budge. She looks at the attendant and replies, not with fire, not with fury, but with finality. No. Just that. A single word. A full sentence. A revolution in a whisper. Because every no a Black woman says in this country still echoes louder than it should. Not because she's angry, but because she dares to choose herself over someone else's comfort. Now Craig grows louder. She doesn't look like a senator, he says under his breath, but just loud enough for others to hear. Not a slur, no. Not a curse. Just code. The kind of code Black folks have had to decode their whole lives. She doesn't look like. She doesn't sound like. She doesn't act like. These aren't statements. They're weapons. Soft as velvet. Sharp as razors. Other passengers begin to watch. Phones are raised, some recording quietly. A woman whispers to her husband. She's just sitting there. Why are they still questioning her? Why indeed? But we already know the answer. Because in America, suspicion doesn't always follow behavior. Sometimes it follows melanin. Finally, Olivia speaks again. Calm. Direct. Unmoved. I booked this seat through official government travel. If you want to verify anything, you can verify it with Washington. And that sentence, the name Washington, hangs in the air like thunder behind a door. Because what do you do when the person you're trying to displace is the system you thought you controlled? Still, they hesitate. They confer. They debate. They're not just trying to solve a seating problem. They're trying to protect the illusion that the man who looks like power must be power, and that the woman who looks like Olivia couldn't possibly be more than him. One of the attendants leans in, whisper soft, "Do you have any ID that confirms your position?" And there it is. Not the question itself, but the burden it carries. Because they never asked Craig Donovan for proof of his right to exist in that seat. They never asked if he looked like a hedge fund manager. They didn't wonder if he earned that ticket. But Olivia? She must prove it. Prove she belongs. Prove she paid. Prove she's real. She reaches slowly into her bag. Not to comply, but to finish the farce. To show them what they should have already known. But even now, her fingers grazing the edge of the Senate badge, she wonders, why must I carry this badge like armor? And the answer is simple. Because sometimes, in America, the only thing that speaks louder than your skin is your title. And that truth? It's heavier than the seat they tried to take. There comes a moment, always too soon, always too familiar, when you are no longer trying to be understood. You are simply trying not to disappear. Senator Olivia Armstrong arrived at that moment, not in the grand chambers of Washington, but here, on an airplane runway. Inside a metal tube where democracy feels more like theater than truth. She holds the badge now. That small rectangle of embossed gold, heavy with meaning. As if the country that gave it to her only believes in her when it's laminated. Let us pause and consider. Why must power be proven only when worn like armor? Olivia didn't want to show it. Because the moment she does, the story shifts from her seat to their error. From her dignity, to their discomfort, from her right to exist as she is, to their need to be convinced. And yet, when you are Black in America, there are days you carry your titles like shields, and your silence like scripture. She lifts the badge. The flight attendant leans closer. The hologram glints under the overhead light. Not just proof, but indictment. The agent, Gwen, stares. Then reads the name aloud. Senator Olivia Armstrong. The words fall heavy, not because they are hard to believe, but because they were never supposed to be true for someone like her. A hush spreads through the cabin like fog on a cold Harlem morning. Passengers whisper, not about the badge, but about their own assumptions. Craig Donovan doesn't back down. Of course not. Privilege rarely retreats. It lingers, hoping the room will forget what it just saw. That could be fake, he mutters. A lot of people know how to make things look real. Even truth, when shown by a black hand, must first be doubted, not examined, not questioned on principle, just doubted because it comes from her. Now the airline staff scramble, checking logs, timestamps, booking codes. They realize the system made a mistake, yes. But that's not what they saw first. They saw a Black woman in 2A and thought, that can't be right. It was never about the seat. It was about the story they had already written before she even sat down. Let me tell you something. And if you're over 65 in this country, you may already know it better than most. Prejudice does not need a reason. It only needs a moment. And Olivia's moment was sitting there, dressed in navy blue, reading policy briefings, while the cabin around her tried to find a way to make her invisible. Now Craig's voice grows sharper. This is special treatment. Just because she's in government, he doesn't hear himself. Or maybe he does. Because in America, when a Black woman asserts her legitimacy, there's always someone ready to call it favoritism, as if her presence must be exceptional, could not possibly be ordinary, could not possibly be deserved. The airline manager arrives. The verdict is clear. Yes, the seat belongs to Senator Armstrong. Her travel was booked through official government channels. Mr. Donovan, we will reaccommodate you. The word again, reaccommodate. Except this time, it's not Olivia being asked to move. It's the man who mistook his comfort for law. But Craig won't move easily. Entitlement rarely packs lightly. You're making a spectacle of this, he snaps. No, sir. You did. When you assumed her place was behind, not beside. When you spoke over her, not to her. When you confused her calm for concession. Olivia doesn't gloat. She doesn't raise her voice. She simply says, I never asked to be treated differently. I only asked to be treated fairly. And in that sentence, a lifetime. The voice of every elder who's been told to wait. Every parent who's had to explain to their child why they were followed in a store. Every worker whose name was mispronounced until they answered in silence. They escort Craig down the aisle. And in that moment, small and quiet, Olivia doesn't feel triumphant. She feels tired. Because justice, when it arrives late, never feels like victory. It feels like a repair. Like patching a wound that never should have been opened. She looks around. Some passengers smile with sympathy. Some avert their eyes. A few still wonder why she made it a big deal. But she knows they know. That the real spectacle was never her defiance. It was their disbelief. The plane begins to taxi. Olivia returns to her briefing papers. But the batch stays on the tray for a moment longer. Not for them. For her. A reminder that she earned this seat. And she earned the right to not have to prove it. But today, she did. And that, my friend, is the quiet violence of living while Black in America. You carry your credentials like lifeboats. On a ship that was never designed to carry you. The plane is in the air now. But make no mistake, just because you've taken off, doesn't mean you've left the ground behind. Some burdens fly with you. And prejudice, I have found, travels light. Senator Olivia Armstrong sits quietly in her rightful seat, 2A. The seat they tried to take. The seat she had to fight to keep. Not with fists, but with documentation. With poise. With the awful, unspoken weight of having to prove, yet again, that she was not the error in the system. The flight attendant comes by again. He's different now, softer, almost reverent. Would you like anything, Senator? He emphasizes the title this time, like a peace offering wrapped in politeness. She nods, not out of grace, but fatigue, because nothing exhausts quite like surviving a moment you didn't create. She accepts water. Decline the champagne. There is no celebration in being validated late. Now the cabin settles. The engines hum. The drinks pour. The in-flight announcements begin. But Olivia's mind does not settle. Because here's the problem. When you've had to pull rank to be treated like a human being, your title becomes both a sword and a shackle. She gazes out the window. Clouds pass like ghost towns. And somewhere down there, the city of Chicago still breathes, still forgets, still survives its own contradictions. She wonders how many others, this morning alone, have had to explain themselves. In grocery stores, in job interviews, on sidewalks they paid taxes to walk on. You see, the story of race in America is not just a collection of violent eruptions. It is a slow drip. 1,000 small humiliations. 100 glances. 10,000 polite exclusions. You don't drown in the flood. You drown in the leak. Someone in 2B, a businessman with salt in his hair and leather in his hands, leans toward her. He doesn't say much. Just, glad you stood your ground. She nods again. Because what can she say? That it shouldn't take a badge to be believed? That she wished he had spoken before the badge came out? That sometimes silence from allies hurts more than the noise from enemies? The crew begins to serve lunch. Options, chicken or pasta. She chooses pasta. Not out of preference. Out of weariness. You pick what seems simplest when your morning has already asked too much of your spirit. As she eats, her thoughts wander. To the man they escorted off the plane. Craig Donovan. Still angry, no doubt. Still convinced he was the victim. Because that is the peculiar genius of American racism. It teaches the privileged to feel persecuted the moment equality appears. Craig didn't lose his seat. He lost his exception. And to some, that is more offensive than any injustice. The plane glides steady. But Olivia's heart is not steady. It aches with a familiar knowledge that even now, as a senator, as a woman who's written policy, passed bills, walks marble halls with her head held high, even now, she remains subject to the same rituals of suspicion, the same presumptions that followed her as a child in a bookstore, a student in a lecture hall, a lawyer in a courtroom, the same whispered disbelief. You? Here? And perhaps that is the sharpest wound. Not that she was challenged. But no one in uniform stopped it. No one said, "Sir, you are out of line." Instead, they all turned to her for proof. Now, at 30,000 feet, she folds the badge and slips it back into her wallet. It shouldn't need to come out again. But she knows it will. Because racism isn't about behavior. It's about assumptions. And the worst ones are inherited, not earned. She turns on her tablet, begins reviewing policy notes. Climate legislation. Environmental protections. She shifts her mind to matters that affect millions. But even here, the residue of the incident clings to her like static. She knows she'll carry it into the Senate chamber. Not as a grievance, but as fuel. Because when you've lived the very inequality the system pretends it has solved, you speak with a fire that can't be faked. Another attendant stops by, this one older, eyes sincere. She leans in. I just want to say, thank you for how you handled that. I saw it. We all did. And I'm sorry. Olivia doesn't smile. She just says, then let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And that, my friend, is the quiet, patient fury of Black survival in this country. We don't need apologies. We need systems to remember what they forgot in the first place. That dignity is not given. It is owed. The seatbelt sign dings. The cabin dims. The plane begins its descent into Washington, D.C. But Olivia Armstrong, senator, public servant, daughter of a long-forgotten mechanic from rural Georgia, knows this descent is not the relief most passengers feel, because when you are Black in America, the landing is rarely soft, even when the flight is. She sits poised, but not at ease. She gathers her things, but not her peace. Peace requires trust, and this country has not yet earned hers. Outside the window, the Capitol unfolds, marble, manicured, majestic. But beneath the dome and monuments are people. People who look like Craig Donovan, in suits that pass bills, while doubting those who dare to challenge them from below. She's walked those halls. She's heard their civility. And she's learned. Politeness is not the same as principle. She thinks again about that flight. About how quickly doubt moved through that cabin. How no one had to shout. How no slur had to be used. How the system rose up not with rage, but with procedure. It was all done correctly, all by the book, and yet it stung like every injustice that came before it, because injustice doesn't always come with a bruise. Sometimes, it arrives wrapped in protocol, and asks to see your papers again. The plane touches down. Applause breaks out softly from a few rows behind. A kind of strange American habit, clapping for gravity. Olivia doesn't clap. She thinks of the people who didn't make it this far. The ones who never got to show their badge. The ones who never got believed. The plane taxis to the gate. She waits. Not out of deference, but to avoid the looks, the stares of passengers now realizing who she is. Some smile. Some nod, awkwardly, as if to say I would have spoken up if I had known. But that's the thing, isn't it? They need the title to offer respect. They need the badge to offer belief. They need the narrative to undo the assumption. She steps into the jet bridge. The air is heavier here, not with humidity, but with unfinished business. And waiting just past the gate is Gwen, the same agent from earlier. Face red with something between shame and duty. She stumbles through a sentence. Senator Armstrong, we want to apologize again. Mr. Donovan has been rerouted. And we've reported the incident. Reported. As if that were a resolution. As if racism could be uploaded into a case management system and closed out before lunch. Craig Donovan stands a few feet away, arms crossed, jaw tight. His eyes follow her like a man watching something slip from his grasp. Not the seat, but the certainty. The certainty that he would always be believed first. That the world was still ordered the way his father promised. That a black woman in 2A was the mistake, not the future. He mutters, some democracy. And Olivia, God help her, almost laughs. Because there it is. The belief that equality is tyranny. That fairness is a theft. That justice, when not selective, is persecution. She doesn't engage. Not because she's above it, but because he's beneath it. The airport terminal is alive with motion, children running, screens flashing, announcements calling names. And yet, Olivia moves through it with a stillness only the weary understand. Outside, her aide is waiting with a car. She slides in, lets the door shut. And for the first time since sunrise, she breathes deeply. But even here, even now, she knows the story isn't over. Because that flight, that confrontation, is not a detour. It is the road. And every time she walks it, she carries two truths. That she is a senator. And that being a senator still isn't enough. The car winds toward Capitol Hill. As it nears the marble steps and iron gates, she sees tourists posing with flags. Children on field trips pointing at the dome. She used to be one of them. Young, hopeful, believing that merit would be enough. That showing up, doing the work, speaking clearly would clear the way. But America taught her otherwise. Not once, but again, and again, and again. She walks into the Senate building. Security greets her with recognition now. Not warmth, but awareness. The kind that comes only after you've had to remind them repeatedly who you are. She nods, passes through. Later that afternoon, during committee hearings, she speaks with fire, measured, factual, and unflinching. Her colleagues nod. Some agree, some oppose, but all of them listen. Because once a black woman makes it through the gate, she speaks not just for herself, but for every locked door she had to break. Every moment of disbelief she had to bear. Every "you don't belong here" she turned into a policy brief. And as the session adjourns, an older senator leans over, whispers, "You handled yourself well this morning." Olivia looks back, tired but unwavering. "Thank you," she says. "But I shouldn't have had to." There is a stillness that comes after conflict. Not peace, no, never peace, but a kind of exhausted quiet. Like the air after a courtroom gavel. Like a church emptied after the funeral. Like the breath one takes not in relief, but in resolve. Senator Olivia Armstrong sat in her office that evening. The Capitol dome now just a silhouette behind thick glass, its elegance masking a history both heavy and holy. She was not thinking of laws. She was thinking of the morning. You see, we don't always carry trauma on our faces. We carry it in our pauses. In the hesitation before answering a polite question. In this way, our eyes scan a room for threat even when we're the guest of honor. That flight didn't just question her seat. It questioned her place. And even now, after the legislation, after the cameras, after the applause, that question echoed. Who gets to belong without explanation? Who gets to walk through America unquestioned? She replayed it. Not the argument, but the silence of the other passengers. Some of them nodded later, sure. Some even offered apologies or shamefaced affirmations. But where were they when it counted? It's a cruel contradiction. In the land of the free, the burden of proof still rests on those born in the margins. And if you are black, if you are a woman, if you are both, your mere presence becomes a test that others grade without your consent. Her aide, Carmen, knocked gently. You have a moment? Olivia nodded. I just wanted to say, Carmen began, Hesitating, "I'm proud of how you handled it. I mean, what they did was wrong. But the way you didn't fold." She trailed off. Olivia looked at her, not just as staff, but as a younger version of herself. Brown. Brilliant. Barely aware of how many doors would still be closed in rooms she'd earned entry to, she spoke softly, but without apology. Composure is a shield, but it shouldn't be required. Later, as the building emptied, Olivia stepped into the hallway, polished floors, white columns, a place of supposed permanence. She walked past portraits of men who never had to show a badge, who never had to explain their worth, who never had to wear their identity like a defense strategy. And she wondered, what kind of country requires its children to succeed in order to be believed? On her way out, she passed an intern, a young black girl, maybe 19, barely hiding her awe. "Senator Armstrong," the girl whispered. "I saw the video. On social media." Olivia paused. The girl looked nervous, but hopeful. "I just wanted to say, what you did, it made me feel like I could get here too." And in that moment, the morning's weight found a counterbalance. Not relief, not vindication, but meaning, because that is what Black perseverance in this country must cling to. If not a win, then a witness. If not validation, then vision. She smiled. A small, tired smile. "Then you better," she said. "And when you do, don't let anyone make you prove what you already know to be true." The girl nodded, her eyes wide. That was the passing of a torch, whether either of them knew it or not. Back in her car, Olivia looked out at the lights of the Capitol fading behind her. She thought again of Craig Donovan, not with anger, but with clarity. Because what he said and what he didn't say, what the staff assumed and what they confirmed, was not about that flight. It was about a hierarchy. And America, even now, remains addicted to hierarchies. Of skin, of gender, of money, of proximity to power. But Olivia Armstrong had learned this. If you cannot dismantle the system in one day, you can damn sure interrupt it. And that morning on that plane, she did. She interrupted the assumption, interrupted the silence, interrupted the myth that progress means equality has arrived. Because progress, beloved, is not the absence of racism. It is the increase in resistance. And resistance is not loud. It is often a quiet, Black woman saying, "No, this seat is mine, and I will not move." In the quiet corridors of power, where marble meets memory and policy is shaped in the mouths of men who have never feared being asked for their identification, Senator Olivia Armstrong finishes her day. But the real work, as always, was not in the vote, nor the speech, nor the policy brief. The real work was surviving the lie. And the lie is this: that we are past all that. They will tell you now that things have changed, that the battles have been fought, that equality has been legislated, signed, sealed, and taught in schools. But we know better. Those of us who have lived long enough. Those of us with graying temples and tired eyes. Those of us who remember back doors and front seats on buses that were not truly empty but simply denied. We know the battle does not end. It just changes clothes. Olivia Armstrong returns to her home that evening. Not a mansion, not a palace, but a house built on earned ground. And when she enters, she does not drop her keys. She drops the day. Because being Black and excellent in America is a full-time job, and the uniform never truly comes off. She sinks into the chair by her window. That same chair her father sat in, years ago, after shifts in the auto shop. Same way, same weariness. But this time, it is not grease under her nails. It is exhaustion under her skin. She turns on the news, just for background. And sure enough, there it is. A small segment. A fleeting headline. A clip gone viral. Senator challenged over first-class seat, reveals badge, shocks airline staff. As if the story were about the reveal. As if the badge were the climax. But that, dear reader, is where America gets it wrong. Again. The climax was not the badge. The climax was the quiet. The restraint. The way Olivia had to become smaller before she was allowed to be seen. Later that week, a constituent approaches her at a quiet cafe in D.C. An older man. Black. Vietnam veteran. He leans in close, not to be secretive, but solemn. "I saw what happened, Senator." She nods. He says, "I fought for this country, same as you fight for it now. But I never thought we'd still be asking for permission to sit down. And that's the thing, isn't it? This fight is not new. It just changes chairs." She thinks of Rosa, not as a symbol, but as a woman. A woman who sat down not to spark a movement, but because she was tired. Tired of standing in a world that saw her as optional. Olivia understands that now more than ever. She too sat down. And the world tried to push her back up. Tried to say, "Not here. Not yet. Not you." But she stayed. And in that stillness, a fire was born. Let us be clear. The greatest form of protest in this nation may no longer be marching. It may be sitting still, in spaces that were built without us, funded without us, but now require our labor, our votes, our voices. To sit still when they ask you to leave. That is revolution. In the months that follow, Olivia does not retell the story often. She does not need to. The people tell it to her. And when they do, it is not the confrontation they remember. It is the posture, the refusal, the way she sat as if the world had no right to move her. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. That justice is not just about laws. It is about presence. About knowing that your body in a place it was never meant to be is a declaration all its own. You've earned your seat. They told her, after she showed them the badge. But here's what they didn't understand. She had already earned it. When she was 10 years old and told she wasn't Senate material. When she was 19 and passed over for internships she qualified for. When she was 26 and sat in the back row of a courtroom, correcting the judge silently in her mind. She earned it the moment she stayed seated on that plane, without raising her voice, because she knew the world was watching and waiting for her to break. But she didn't. And you, those of you who have lived long enough to know what this country tries to forget, you know that kind of strength, because you, too, have sat quietly in rooms that didn't want you, and dared to stay anyway. That's the legacy Olivia Armstrong carries now. Not just in chambers and votes, but in every waiting room, every sidewalk, every seat at every table that once said reserved. Reserved for whom? Not anymore. So let the story be told, not for the twist, but for the truth. That a black woman on a plane didn't move. And the world had to. End.